Where were we? Um, okay, so Mickey, you brought up an interesting point about being like able-bodied, and you're talking about your privilege about that. And I think one thing that, I struggle with regularly is what does it mean to like be an ally in these communities, right? You're an able-bodied person, right? I was talking to my girlfriend Stephanie, who is also underrepresented engineer.
Yep.
Women in
Yeah.
engineering is not
Women
a
in
common thing.
engine.
Um,
Yep.
and I was just talking to her a couple weeks back about um, she is part of some arts communities where there are people that are aware of like injustice and stuff like that. But here in Southern California, there are people that I feel like they take it too far in the sense that like there are white people that have the privilege, right? That want to be allies, that lower themselves down to be like, hey, I'm standing in solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
where they're like, hey, let me like lower my position to like, do you know what I mean? Where it's like,
Yeah.
hey, there are people that aren't well off, so I'm gonna sell my house because owning a house is showing that I'm white and privileged. Where it's like, shouldn't, in my opinion, shouldn't what you do as an ally be like, hey, let's help to put effort into building
Yeah.
community?
Okay.
I think I understand what you're saying, and I think
Yeah,
it's very interesting when we start to talk about allies. Because particularly in that example, if I was an ally, I would have
yeah,
sold my house. I'm like,
yeah.
hey, do people need a place to stay? Does anybody need a place to stay?
Yeah,
Can I put some like I got some places to
yeah.
stay, come extra room. But I think so. My mentor, Miss Shanti Blackman, who is like an amazing woman, she does this workshop called Actors, Allies, and Accomplices. And it's a self-reflective, part of it is self-reflective, and where you, after giving the definitions of what an actor is, someone who just kind of pretends like they actually care about a cause, but don't really does anything. An ally is someone who's like, I I'm trying to help. How do I help? They show up at a protest, but maybe they're like, that's the only protest they might go to. And then you have an accomplice who's someone who's like, how can I be how can I work with you in this community? Where can I best be utilized? How can I use my privilege to help someone else?
Is it like 3 levels of involvement? That's what it kind of sounds like.
Yes, kind of like
Okay.
that. So we so in this workshop, what I really love about it is that it asks you to think of a cause. Like, so you go through your own identities and you think about your privileged identities, and you then make a plan about, okay, I've done this. I've thought about my identities. I have taken this assessment to see where do I fall in the actors, allies, or accomplice of this particular identity, privileged identity. And then now I'm going to make a plan to how do I get to the next stage. So if I'm an actor in this, how do I move to an ally in this? And then later on, how do I move to an accomplice? So an accomplice is kind of like the person that is like busting down barriers and trying to be that, like, really trying to make that kind of radical change. And I remember the first time I was in this workshop, I did my my privileged identity that I chose was religion, because I was raised Christian, and I live in America, where although they say that the separation of church and state, there is not.
Yep, agreed.
And I remember thinking about, like, how can I be an ally to, so if I think about a very targeted group in America when it comes to religion, like, how do I help my friends in Islam, like, and people who are practicing, like, Muslim? Where do I go? How do I help? How can I do this? And so when we think about how can we best utilize our privilege, and particularly, I think when it comes to people who, like, white folks who are trying to be allies or accomplices and having a hard time, one, understanding what that means, and then what can they do about it. It's all about the community. Like,
Yeah.
you can't try to help a community that you're not a part of.
Yeah.
And so like what does your friend group look like? What does, when you go out, what are some things that are happening in your neighborhood? And then what are some things that you can be aware of? And then where could you use your privilege? Like I think about I don't know if you've ever been to that walkway by UNLV between the cafeteria and UCC. That used to be a really kind of a steep hill to get up that back way. And in talking with one of our assistant vice presidents when we were walking one time, and I was like, this is a hill. If somebody's like in a wheelchair or something, they're gonna have to really. And our AVP was like, yeah. He was like, let's do something about this, and like lower the grade. So like you can use your privilege, being aware of something to be like, I have the power to do this, and let me do it. As well as because the community, the community that we were part of was the school, the UNLV community. So we could do something like that. I think especially when it comes to like community organizing circles, it's hard because people can be very mean. I think that especially in our age of social media and people trying to be, or the age of the celebrity activists, people are all trying to be.
Well, there's white saviorism too. I think that's the other thing I was trying to get to, and I think that
I was going to touch on that too.
Yeah, that social media and like the celebrity activism is totally
because
the worst part of all of that. Yeah,
everyone's trying to get a check because that's what it boils down to, is that it's not about community, it's about capitalism. It's about about the bottom dollar. And so everybody's trying to be the next Sean King, which I don't know why you would try to be that man, but or the next what's Blue Vest name? I forgot the Blue Vest name.
From D-Ray Atkinson?
Yes, yeah, D-Ray, yeah. He ain't welcome around these parts. But people are trying to be like the next so and so. And then you have people who are, well-meaning, but then cross the line into white saviorism. And all of what it is that just because you're not a part of community, you don't answer it to anybody.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting because like that's kind of what I'm realizing in my life in like my own personal ways, like breaking down implicit biases I have is building connection.
Exactly.
Right. And it is interesting. It is interesting that the society that we're placed into makes it so that we have to be self-serving.
Oh, definitely.
Right. And so we're not, there's no real impetus to like create that individual connection or build people up. Right.
Oh, great.
You can build systems, you can build institutions, whatever, but there's no real like reason to build people up.
Yep. See, and so that's one thing. When I was exposed to that too, my friend and a former manager as well, he is Indian, not Indian American, but like just straight up Indian. Like he came over in a visa. One thing he said was surprising to him is the lack of community within the United States, because a lot of the stuff that they would do, like one big practice, even I experienced this, where it's like we're moving more towards it now, like through the millennials and everything, like as we age and get ready for like childbearing, stuff like that. It's like telling a child or a young adult to leave when they're comfortable, when they're ready, versus saying you're 18, you're an adult now, go live life as an adult. Because what he was saying in his village, which I was also surprised by because I'm not familiar with villages, I'm familiar with the city lifestyle. He was saying in the communities there's much more of a build-up. Like they know how rare the opportunities are for each one of their individuals to make it somewhere. Like he graduated from one of the top Indian tech schools or universities out there, and his whole village praised him for it. But he was saying that his parents, his community, so many loved ones around him, they supported him until it was ready for him to make that leap. And that's something we absolutely kind of lack in the States. And I think that's what kind of leads to so much dissonance between us, whether it's like nationality, ethnicity, so on and so forth, is because we're much more willing to say, this is who I am, and block out all variance versus actually trying to understand the variance between each and every one of us. My interpretation, at least.
What was really interesting about that, so there's this YouTube channel that I follow, which kind of talks about city planning. Specifically in the States.
Oh yeah, we talked about this later.
Did I send that to you? Yeah. What was really interesting is like the myth of suburbia, right? Like it's everybody's spread out, everybody has their own land or whatever, and you don't need to have that sense of community because you're not living close by other people, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you drive into the city, you go to work, you drive home, you don't really know your neighbors, you don't really know what's going on around you. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, I think, is just to go back to implicit bias, is like, I feel like here, at least on the West Coast, I think the East Coast is a bit different, especially in like New York. I think, Darius, we were talking about kind of like how New York, like you can join a community, but here in LA, it's like, it's so hard to find community that like, when do you even join? Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think like there's so much implicit bias that we hold that like, this is the way that things always have been and it always will be. One, because of the system that we're in, where it's like, hey, we have to be self-serving, but even the cities that are built around us are built to serve that same purpose, right? And and not even to get into the issues like of like inner city and but like at least from the perspective of like, you know, where I live in the suburbs in LA, it's like I'm not connected to anything around me.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I would really like to have here. But it's just the area that we live in, right? We have these big box stores where it's like you got these parking lots that just literally separate communities.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
So sorry, you just brought that up, and it was interesting. Tangent.
Oh, no. Just got off the clock, just got on my chill. Called on my homie Brent to see what be the deal. What you trying to do? I'm just trying to heal. Hella floated, never bloated's what I'm trying to feel. Hop in the whip and